Even if my book turns out to be a flop, at least we have all the other good books here to save us. Welcome to my annual anticipated books of the year. For this year, I'm going to tell you about 26 books coming out that are not my book. I'm also going to narrow down even further and make it 26 debut books coming out with a special focus on books that are not a lead title and therefore need more support and recognition. So basically, if you are not familiar, lead titles are the top books that publishers will choose to heavily support with marketing and budget and resources. Lead titles get chosen for all kinds of reasons. Usually if the publisher believes that this book has a high sales potential, or if the concept of this story has what they believe to be like a strong marketing hook, or if it's just like very commercial and in line with like what's trending right now, or in my case, if they have a big platform. All of these reasons are very arbitrary, but I think it just goes to show that like a lot of times when books become successful or are on the New York Times bestsellers list, it's really because they have so much support from their publishers, because they were able to have big marketing pushes. In reality, a majority of the books don't have that many resources to get marketed, and some authors have publishers that aren't even big enough to even have any lead titles at all. So while it's been very exciting for me to talk about The Secret World of Briar Rose, I also know that I'm very privileged and lucky to have a platform and a publisher who supports me. So I want to support underrepresented 2026 debuts that haven't had those same opportunities as I have. I wanted to shout out basically all kinds of books that need more recognition. Gay books, authors of color, small publishers, indie authors, young adult, fantasy, thriller. We're gonna go through all of them in this video. If you're interested in any of these, go ahead and pre-order these books or request them on NetGalley or add them on Goodreads or Storygraph or whatever platform that you use. Any of these things can help an author out, because then their publishers will see, oh, people are adding these books on their shelves, therefore maybe we should invest in these books a little bit more. The one disclaimer I will share is if any publishers or authors are watching this video and you see that your book is being featured and you want to send me an advanced copy, unfortunately, I'm going to tell you right now, I will have to pass because I am very bad at reading advanced copies before the book actually comes out. So I do not want to waste anyone's resources by receiving a book that I won't be able to read in time. And so it's just going to be a lot better use case for you to send a book to like a reader that can actually read much faster than me. I would much rather support the book by talking about it in this video and then reading it when it comes out. And if you are a reader watching this video, just enjoy all the good shit that we have in the pipeline. Even if my book turns out to be a flop, at least we have all the other good books here to save us. So before we get into the list, I want to thank today's sponsor. Thank you to Snakzy for sponsoring today's video. Snakzy is an app that turns your game time into rewards, and you can use my link for a sign-up bonus. The process is super simple. Basically, on the app, you can discover a bunch of new games under Game Discovery. Every game you see shows you how much you can earn by playing. So all you do is pick a game that you like, play them to get Snakzy coins, and then cash out with real money on PayPal. Or if you prefer gift cards, there's tons of brands like Amazon, Netflix, Uber Eats, and Visa. Or if you prefer gaming credit, you can redeem them for PlayStation, Xbox, Steam, and Nintendo. It's pretty much a win-win because you're earning real rewards for games that you enjoy playing and then redeeming those rewards at brands that you love, or you can cash out straight to PayPal. So if you would like to try out this app to play games and get some easy money, sign-up bonus is available in the description, where I will have my link available for you to get that bonus. So go ahead and grab it while it is still live. Anyway, back to the video. Okay, so 26 books is a lot to cover in a video, so I am going to try to be concise with it, and I will go in chronological order of release date. Starting with a book that's coming out January 27 called Better Catch Up Krishna Kumar. I love that we're getting more rom-coms with brown girls now because it is a much needed space in, at least in Western publishing. This is a young adult romance book featuring a bisexual main character. She spends her whole summer in India flirting with her neighbor, but nothing really comes out of it, and she realizes that she's gonna go to college being the only freshman who's never been kissed. But the universe seems to be giving her a sign for that because her flight ends up being delayed right at the same time that she receives a very flirty text from her neighbor. So now she's like, oh my god, this is like my last chance to get that perfect first kiss with him. The problem is he is several miles away at a family wedding, so she has to ask her cousin and cousin's best friend for help because that friend is the only one with a car. So this is about a trio getting together on a road trip to crash the wedding and save her summer. And I'm pretty sure that she's gonna end up falling for the friend that's on the road trip with her, but we'll have to read it to find out. If you're looking for an adult romance though, there is also Love from the Cosmos coming out on February 3rd. This is about a pediatrician who's immigrated from Lagos to Boston. And from what I heard about Boston, I don't know how I would feel about being there as a person of color. So instead, her solution is to join an astrology dating app that uses birth charts to match soulmates with a 99% success rate. I don't know how legit that is, but that's according to the summary. One of the matches that she does get ends with her discovering infidelity. So, you know, it's really bad out here for the single ladies. So she gets drunk and files a complaint to the app. And this is where the main guy comes in. He is one of the 3 matchmakers and is actually the one who wrote the algorithm that seemed to have been so successful for the clients using the app until the main girl's complaint triggers damage control for him. She gets contracted to receive a dating coach who will walk her through 3 assigned dates, and he volunteers to be her dating coach. So it will be very interesting to see how this romance book navigates the 2 of them having to work together as they fall for one another. Next, we have Saltswept coming out on February 5. This looks like it's going to be a really fun fantasy pirate adventure starring a ragtag crew. So we have a pirate, a farmer, a priestess, a pickpocket, and a talking otter cat. So very random characters thrown together, but it looks like it's going to be like a found family situation. They go on a quest to sail into this whirlpool where no one has ever escaped so that they can find the mysterious treasure hidden within it. This is the first book of a fantasy duology that is based on Southeast Asian mythology. I love adventure stories and the idea of like swashbuckling heroes, but I think it really comes together when you have the found family component of it. Another fantasy coming out is A Day of Breath on February 10th. This is a dark epic fantasy involving demons, and the main character is a warrior who was given magical strength. Her job is to protect her kingdom from these demonic hordes that have emerged from a rift between different realms. Problem is her powers are fading, and so she has to figure out a way to get them fast before the demons come. This is when the main guy comes in, and he is an heir who finds out that he has not been chosen to be the next ruler. So he convinces the main girl to leave the edge, which I assume to be like the borders around the kingdom that she's been having to like serve and protect all on her own. She hasn't left in the past 10 years, but he convinces her that they need to do that for the Day of Breath. And that's basically the one day a year where demons can't reach the rift. And with her going on this journey, this will be a chance for her to try to renew her strength. Unfortunately, on the one day that it should be impossible, of course, that is when a bunch of parasitic demons spread throughout the kingdom. They basically have until midnight to find a way to stop the carnage before the rift awakens again. So it just sounds like very high stakes and very stressful. But I personally like reading stories where I wonder how the hell the characters are going to get out of this situation. So we'll see what happens. Next, we also have Deathly Fates coming out on April 14th. This is a debut inspired by the Chinese folk practice of necromancy. The main girl is a priestess who is paid to guide the deceased home. So she's someone who's very much used to death, but one day her dad collapses, and this is when she's like, oh shit, now shit is getting real. And so she accepts this dangerous job that will provide her enough money to try to cover the medical aid that he needs. And this job involves traveling to a hostile state to retrieve the corpse of a missing prince. So she has this reanimation talisman that is supposed to be placed on the dead prince's head and make the corpse obedient to her commands, but the talisman actually ends up bringing the prince back to life. So now she has to help the prince on his quest, which is to find and purify evil spirits for their chi, because that's the only way that he can keep his soul anchored to his body. So the book follows these two on a journey across the countryside where they encounter enemy spies and vengeful ghosts. But as all juicy stories have, there must be a bigger plot afoot. So there is definitely some more tea going on behind how the prince actually died. And so they have to figure out what those secrets are and how that might impact the kingdom itself. Now, you prefer your fantasy to be more on the historical side. There is also Burn the Sea coming out on April 21st. This is a fantasy that reimagines the Portuguese attacks on South India in the 1500s. And it's actually based on the real life queen story. In this world, there are monsters that are basically giant half men, half snakes that come from the sea. Their invasion happened more than 50 years ago, and they haven't been seen since. But now in present day, they come back with a vengeance, and they give the main character's people a choice. Either pay the tithes or suffer total devastation for her homeland. So now she has to marry the neighboring king in order to get the resources she would need to protect her people. What I find interesting is that this is a character that had thought she would be a warrior instead of a queen, and she hadn't expected to be in an arranged marriage. And so I am very curious on how her background and her combat training is going to play in like this political story that's happening here. For those of you who want a gothic story, we also have The Wives of Herrick Hall, coming out on May 5th. The book starts off with the main character being banished to an isolated manor called Herrick Hall, and she has to serve as the companion to the mistress of Herrick Hall. This mistress is suffering from a mysterious illness where she is spending several nights witnessing her death over and over. So the main character is like, damn, this job really sucks. But then surprise, it sucks even more because she ends up meeting the Herrick wives. These wives are ghosts that start to trespass into the main character's dreams, and they also act as shadows stalking through the halls, and they are basically stuck in this place because they have their last dying wish, which is to destroy Herrick and everyone under its roof. So the main character is like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. Problem is, she and her mistress have now fallen in love with each other. So we follow these sapphic women confronting Herrick's curse to try to find their way to freedom. Also coming out on May 5th is Wrong Order. This is a billionaire romance that involves being in the workplace and a friends with benefits situation. The main girl works as an assistant to the CEO of a prestigious law firm, while the main guy is one of the world's youngest billionaires who ends up in a PR crisis because one of his clients betrays him. And so now, in order to do some damage control, he turns to an external PR management and hires the main girl. So as the two of them work together to try to fix this PR mess, it obviously becomes even more of a mess when they develop attraction to one another and they try to keep it simple by agreeing to a friends with benefits arrangement. I will be interested to see if this book can dare make me sympathize with a billionaire, or at the very least see some messiness happen, because what do you mean you hire someone for PR and then you end up sleeping with them? That's gonna blow up in your face real quick, and I will be there to see what happens. Another book coming out on May 5 is How the Story Goes. This is about a young widower who recently lost his wife to cancer. On top of him dealing with grief and taking care of their 8-year-old daughter, he also finds out that one of her last wishes is for him to write the final book of her mega popular children's fantasy series. He has no idea how to complete the series because even though he's an author as well, he has only written literary mysteries. Then he meets the main girl of the book at a local bookstore in a New England town. She moved back home after dropping out of her MFA program because of a disastrous affair. And when he realizes that she's a super fan of his wife's series, they decide to work together to complete the series. And at first I thought this was going to be some kind of heartwarming story about falling back in love with writing again, but the summary mentions that the main guy uncovers another secret about his wife's final wishes. We don't know what the secret is, but it's juicy enough for him to question the partnership that he has with the main girl. And so I'm curious to find out what happens and what their co-partnership looks like. For those wanting a sapphic romance, there is also Smash or Pass coming out on May 12th. This is about a teenage autistic girl who gets dumped by her boyfriend right before she joins beach volleyball camp. There she gets paired up with another girl who is a mysterious, standoffish volleyball legacy. And even though the main girl is trying to get back together with her boyfriend, she ends up finding some surprising feelings of her own for the other girl. This looks like it's gonna be a cute, sporty summer romance, and I'm really glad that queer sports is becoming an intersection of media that people are consuming now. Another young adult book coming out on May 12th is You're Dead to Me, Reed Walker. This is a supernatural rom-com where two academic rivals are trapped together as ghosts to haunt the same house. The main girl is a high-achieving student who's used to winning everything, but then she dies after a graduation party in an abandoned mansion, while the main guy is her academic rival and was supposed to go to Harvard, and he just so happens to be dead with her. They have to overcome their differences while sharing this mansion in order to figure out the mysteries behind how they died, and also to hunt down a murderer who is still on the loose. Based on the summary, they will most likely fall for each other as well, and so I think it's sweet that you can still find love even after you're dead. Then on June 2nd, there is another young adult book that is sharing my book's birthday. It's a fantasy book called The Game of Oats, and it takes place in 1896. The main character is a trapeze artist working at the circus that's underground in Paris. In this circus, there are performers that are bound by these magical contracts, which also makes them players in the Game of Oats, which is a tournament watched by the wealthy elite because only the rich would be into this twisted shit going on. In this tournament, 12 people compete and only one will make it out alive. The main girl's sister had been one of the unlucky people that were in the games last year and had died, and so now the main girl is out for revenge. And so when she's chosen to compete in this year's tournament, she tries to figure out ways to play dirty and form alliances in order to win. Competition stories are always really fun, but I think this one seems to have such a unique setting in historical Paris that we haven't really seen before. And I'm also curious how the main girl's background as a trapeze artist will be useful when she tries to compete in the games. Then on June 9, we have a book called The Letters from the Last Apothecary. The comps for this sound so good because it was comped as Emily Wilde meets Divine Rivals and You've Got Mail but with a magical twist. The book is about a woman who gets a job at the last magical apothecary just as a way to make ends meet while she's waiting to hear back from the Institute of Magic. There she meets a grumpy apothecarist who is very no-nonsense and rigid and uptight, and they seem to have a mutual disdain for each other, especially because she keeps on outsmarting him at every turn and she's very opinionated. So in the shop, they constantly butt heads, but what they don't know is that they have actually fallen for each other because for the past several months, they've been exchanging anonymous love letters to one another, not knowing each other's identities. The stakes get raised when the apothecary is supposed to close in 6 months, and so the two of them, even though they hate each other IRL, they have to figure out a way to save the shop. It seems like a really sweet story, and I'm also a sucker for relationships that form out of reluctant partnership. Also coming out on June 9 is Our Sister's Keeper. This takes place in Mississippi in 1927, specifically in a town that is basically perfect because it is a wealthy, all-black town. Part of why the town is flourishing is also because there are women who have the ability to pull traumatic memories away from men and essentially freeing them up from pain. What this also means though is that remnants from those memories also haunt the women. At some point, an unexpected death happens. We don't know who, but it is the catalyst to make these two sisters come together to figure out what is going on in their town and how to deal with these ghoulish walking nightmares that are now petrifying this town, and also discovering more about their powers along the way. And overall, the story just sounds like a really cool blend of historical fiction and Southern Gothic psychological horror. Then on June 11, there is a young adult fantasy book coming out called Love, Gods, and Sinners. This is set in an alternate futuristic world in Singapore where descendants of ancient magical clans get to put on secret identities and battle on the streets. The main characters are two roommates who both fight and flirt with each other, and they also go out at night to take on their secret identities and go on these missions for their respective magical clans. What becomes complicated is them being tasked to try to kill each other, and they have to start this cat and mouse game. But obviously it becomes so much more complicated when not only are they falling for each other, but they're also roommates. Oh my god, they were roommates. Overall, this is an urban fantasy that is enemies to lovers and sounds like it's gonna have a lot of fun action, and it takes place in what seems to be a really cool world. Then on June 16, we also have a romantasy called A Prince Among Pirates. The main character is a nobleman who is constantly trying to avoid his responsibilities, and so when he has this arranged marriage looming and more responsibilities stacking up, he tries to escape his life and makes the impulsive decision to join a pirate ship. There he meets the captain, who is of course charismatic and handsome, and he's been leading a crew of misfits, and the book is about him making new adventures with this pirate crew, but when his past catches up to him, he's gonna have to decide whether he will stay as a gentleman or join the life of the pirates. Then on June 23rd, we have a young adult fantasy called A Great and Powerful Tyranny. This is also a Wizard of Oz retelling. The main character is this girl who's lost her family to a tragic accident and since then has been living with her grandmother. But then she finds out that her grandma has been keeping a secret from her, which is that her mother was never a doctor, and in actuality, she was studying the supernatural. What's strange is that she also left behind a strange mirror, and it was like the only thing that she left behind. So the main girl is super angry with her grandma and drives off in a rage, but then she accidentally falls through the mirror and into this terrifying land that is ruled by the Mage King. So in this new land, she makes new allies, and they have to work together to figure out how to overthrow the Mage King, while she also discovers more about her family's legacy. I think for people who are wanting to fill a void after the Wicked movies are now over, this would be a good book to check out next. And then the fairy tale adventures continue because on June 30, there is a book coming out called Cursed Ever After. I think if you're gonna find my fairy tale book to be too depressing to read, Cursed Ever After is definitely gonna be a much better solution for that, because this one just seems to be much more humorous and snarky and fun. It follows the classic tropes of fairy tales in the beginning, where the main character is a bad thing who was born on a bad day and was cursed with bad luck. Her village has blamed her for every misfortune that has happened, and so all she wants is to escape her village. And so on her 17th birthday, she makes that wish, and it sort of kind of comes true. She has to follow a quest in order to fulfill a favor to a witch, and this quest is to escort the prince to the dark and deadly bosque for his wedding. I don't think this quest is supposed to be like a big deal because this prince is apparently the least significant of the princes in his family line, but this little errand spirals out of control when there is a bunch of greedy assassins and a murderous cult and a vicious tyrant, and even the main character's own curse getting in the way. Obviously, I'm a sucker for subverted fairy fairy tales, but I also think it's cool that it has Latinx representation, and it also sounds like it's going to be very action-packed. Another young adult fantasy coming out on July 2nd is Mirrorwoven. The main character in this book is secretly a runaway princess. She flees from her family and home after her sister gets murdered by her boyfriend, and since then has taken on this magically constructed mirror-woven face so that she is now unrecognizable. The only caveat is that the enchantment that's hiding her identity will be broken with true love's kiss, which in theory doesn't seem like it would be a problem until she becomes a court bard to the newly widowed royal heir of the new city that she's in. This girl also has a sister-in-law, and I believe this will be a sapphic love triangle where the two women are very different. One of them is too naive and trusting, while the sister-in-law is more dangerous and brilliant. And so it's going to be one of those love triangles where, depending on who the main character chooses, is also a representation of what values or kind of life she wants to have for herself. I'm so excited to see how the sapphic love triangle will play out, and I'm kind of into the sister-in-law from what it sounds like, so we'll see how it goes and what the main character chooses. Also coming out on July 2nd is an indie book called A River Like Mine. This is a queer thriller book that follows a main character who's had a very tragic past. Basically, when she was only 4 months old, her aunt murdered her family on Christmas Eve. And so now, at the age of 34, Hollywood has been trying to get their greedy little hands on her story to make a documentary about it. Obviously, she is reluctant to revisit that past, so she turns to her long-distance crush to tell them about her worries. This crush is not only the host of a popular podcast series, but is also part of her own true crime story as well. The book follows multiple timelines across several decades for both of these characters and their family legacies. It sounds like there's a lot of murder and drama and mystery, like the main girl having an uncle whose murder was unsolved, and her crush, the podcast host, having had experienced a cross-country kidnapping while she was still in her mom's womb. I think their past might be connected to each other because in the summary it says that there's only one person who can make sense of the past and all of the chaos that has happened. We don't know who this person is, but she is in prison, and so we have to follow the main character mustering up the strength to visit this woman and try to find some kind of truth and closure from her story. And then on July 14, we have a horror book coming out. This debut is called Homesick, and it follows a main character who experiences a violent incident at her work, and so she tries to look for a fresh start by going off into the Scottish countryside in a remote cottage far away from her old life. But in the solitary cottage, she finds that it's only semi-detached, and there is like this thin wall that is separating her from a total stranger. And this neighbor is really strange. Like, she has an unnerving smile, and the main girl can't help but feel like there is something wrong with her, especially when she starts experiencing disturbances in her home. The paranoia gets even worse when local people start to share strange stories about her house, and it gets to a point where the main character believes that her neighbor actually may be behind the strange disturbances in the first place. When it comes to horror, I find psychological horror to be the most interesting, and so I'm really curious to find out the mystery behind the story, and if this weird neighbor is actually like a suspicious person, or if there's gonna be something totally new that has yet to be uncovered. And then on July 21st, there is a young adult book coming out called Alex by Proxy. The main character is a Munchausen by proxy victim. He's had to recover from years of illness because of his mother. Now that he's trying to get his footing back and start a new life, he also has to decide if he can testify against his own mom. So while he's waiting for the trial, his friends convince him to start a podcast so that he can tell his own story. This podcast is kind of like a double-edged sword because on one hand, it brings him closer to his old life by giving him a chance to hang out with his old friends and have fun and crack jokes with them. But then on the other hand, it also brings upon new memories that surface and also disturbing new revelations that he hadn't considered before. So we follow the main character's deteriorating mental health as he starts to question the line between truth and reality, and that makes it even more complicated with figuring out if he even trusts himself enough to testify. I find Munchausen by proxy to be so fascinating, but I've never read a book where a character has dealt with that before. So I'm really curious to see this author's depiction of mental illness and the main character's story with trying to figure out what version of the truth he can accept in order to move forward. Coming out on August 18, we have Bound by Fury. This is a contemporary fantasy about a girl who has grown up hearing her grandmother's tales about brown girls with magic, and she's always dismissed them as just stories and nothing more. But then her grandma's sudden death awakens this dangerous power that's actually been building underneath the main girl. So in order to find the answers about these powers and where they came, she joins this elite boarding school in the Appalachian Mountains. This is the same school that her grandma once attended attended, and is also rumored to be haunted by ghosts of witches past. So in this boarding school, the main girl also runs into her grumpy ex-best friend who is trying to get her to leave campus, as well as his cousin who the main girl almost kissed last summer, which sounds like there's gonna be a love triangle situation from here, but we still got plot because the main girl also finds out about this local legend about the gruesome deaths of 12 witches on campus. She can't help but feel a connection to these women, and so as she gets deeper into trying to find out more about the story, there's another person out there that is trying to stop her from exposing the school's dark past, to the point where they're willing to kill to stop her. This sounds like this will be a great book for the fall season, especially when there's so much mystery going on with the plot and just like a little bit of fantasy going on too. Next, coming out on August 25 is Portrait of a Witch Undone. This is a fantasy that takes place in contemporary New England. The main character was someone who was once the strongest witch of her generation until she messes up a spell that ends up hurting her reputation and her best friend. This is a spell where she had tried to contact Lady of the Fens, who is a revenant that lures people to their deaths in the marshlands of the North Shore. So since then, the main character has been tainted with this wild magic, and this magic has been eating away at her mind, and she's trying to figure out a way to stop it, where there's a link to this decades-old art theft worth $500 million. There's a stolen painting with an empty frame, and her best friend ends up disappearing inside it, and so the main character has to follow her. Inside this empty frame, they end up in the Other Marsh, which is basically a deadly realm and half-world. In it, there are secrets about the North Shore's history and what happened to all of the other masterpieces that had disappeared from the museum decades ago. And apparently, the stolen art in that museum is based off of an actual thing that happened, where in the 1990s, 13 artworks had been taken from that museum and it had never been solved. So it's cool that this book basically reimagines what could have happened and added some lore to it. Next, we also have a book called Moss Blood, and it doesn't have a specific release date. The only information I've been able to find is that it's going to come out in this fall. Basically a dark academia story that takes place in modern day Paris, and the main character is an ambitious alchemist who has to uncover dark secrets that are going on in her university when there is an immortal professor there who actually ends up being murdered. This murder also might be tied to the mysterious past that the main character has, and that is all I know for now, but the comps sound really strong. It was basically compared to The Starless Sea meets Ninth House. It sounds like it's going to be really moody and dark, so it would be perfect for the fall season. And then another book by an Asian author coming out on November 10 is Blood of Silver. The main character is Vietnamese, and basically when she is at her mom's funeral, she gets visited by a strange boy who hints to her these secrets about her mom's past. Now, obviously, if you're saying some cryptic shit at someone's funeral, the daughter is gonna find out what the hell is going on. She ends up being thrust into another world, more specifically a realm governed by ancient magics. In this world, she meets that mysterious boy again, and he is the crown prince of that realm. In this kingdom, there are these vicious demons that are attacking the land. She finds out that a long time ago, her mom had sealed this portal to try to keep these demons from breaking free and attacking them, but now the demons are out again, and the prince believes that the main character has the power to seal it once more, just like her mom did. Unfortunately, not everyone is on the same page here. Some people are out to get her, and so someone actually ends up entering the main character in a deadly competition. So now she has to fight for her own survival, and at the same time, there is this other person who is a leader of the mage hunters who is trying to seek her out. So she's trying to juggle all of this at the same time. Also, this other world that she's in is inspired by Spirited Away, which to me means that this fantasy is going to be both whimsical and a little bit dark, since it has a little bit of like a horror edge to it. So I look forward to seeing what happens, and I love that we're seeing more Southeast Asian characters and authors in publishing too. So that concludes 26 books that are coming out in 2026. Let me know which books from this list that you are excited for, or any books that I didn't get to talk about that you want to shout out. My next videos will talk about some books that I did read recently, as well as some publishing videos that I aim to show you, specifically about my book cover design process and other fun stuff as well for those who are interested in the behind the scenes stuff. So I will see you next time. Bye!